Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Continuing the Conversation webinar series, Celebrating Success Stories in Outdoor Recreation. This series is a follow-up to the 2023 Outdoor Recreation Summit, and we decided to continue the conversation about some of our most popular and most thought-provoking topics that we addressed in Butte in 2023. I will wait a couple of minutes and just handle some preliminary stuff here to let people come in. We have Melissa on the back end here running the deck. Our trusty deck operators are on spring break, so she and I will do the best we can to keep it as professional and flowing as our webinars have been. So this is our 5th of 5 episode, and we're going to address the issue of inclusive recreation and hear from our guests about how they are enhancing accessibility for all in their community with some lessons learned for all of us to increase accessibility in our communities. Next slide. Few reminders, this episode will be recorded and shared. So if you want to have it or share it, you can do that. You'll get an email. The slides will be shared, and we'll ask that you submit comments or questions in the chat box. We'll monitor the chat box as we go on, but we'll also have about 10 or so minutes at the end to have an interactive Q&A with our guests. Interactive in that we'll share your comments or questions and ask them what their thoughts are. So next. So today what we're going to cover is this is the format that we've used for all of our webinars. First, we address a challenge or opportunity in the community and talk about it a little bit. What was the opportunity or project that came out of that challenge? What roadblocks or impediments did you encounter during coming up with a solution? How did you solve them? How has this project built momentum for your future work? And what lessons have you learned? And do you have any advice? We'll follow that with a Q&A session. Next. I'll introduce myself as the moderator of this discussion. Diane Conradi. I'm the CEO and founder of Outdoor Community Partners, formerly known as Montana Access Project. Our projects have been so popular that we have expanded our reach beyond Montana. Our Outdoor Community Partners is dedicated to teaming up with communities who are seeking inspired places to get outdoors for community health, economic vitality, and health and quality of life. I will turn it over to Kayla and Brenden to introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Kayla Mosher. I'm the Montana Outreach Coordinator for Kaniksu Land Trust. Land trusts are conservation organizations, and ours covers Bonner and Boundary County of Idaho and Sanders County of Montana. And I'm based out of Thompson Falls, Montana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brenden Dalin. I am the Independent Living and Adaptive Recreation Specialist at Summit Independent Living in Missoula, Montana. Summit is one of 4 independent living centers in Montana, where we advocate for people with disabilities to live a more independent lifestyle. So happy to be here.
Great. Thank you too for agreeing to share your experience with us. So next slide. We'll kick it off by having you talk about what the challenge or opportunity, two sides of the coin, were in your community. Next slide.
Yeah, so like the title of the webinar, our project is about accessibility and inclusion in the outdoors for people with disabilities. And this is something that I've worked a lot in my life, growing up with parents working in disability services. And so getting people with disabilities outdoors is a real passion of mine. And then within Kaniksu Land Trust, we've also worked a lot to make the outdoors as accessible to everyone in our community as possible. And through some other projects that we've done with listening sessions from community members, we've also heard from them that more accessibility outdoors is wanted. And so we've taken on a project of working on disability access and inclusion. And through that, we've built some partnerships, including Brenden from Summit Independent Living. And then we can go, I think, to the next slide. And so, yeah, we went after a grant through the Land Trust Alliance. Next slide. So that is the grant was called Partnerships for Disability Accessibility, Inclusion, and Leadership. So that allowed us to solidify these partnerships with Brenden at Summit Independent Living. We've also been working with the Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities based out of Missoula. And we're engaging community members with disabilities to learn about what they would like to do outdoors and what barriers they face, and how we as a land trust can better improve access and inclusion for people with disabilities. And we're super happy to be able to partner with Brenden, who has a lot of experience. So if you want to talk about some of the other things you've done too, Brenden.
Yeah, so I get a little of my background. Growing up in Montana, I, found myself enjoying the outdoors on a regular basis. It was kind of my escape. And, later became my identity, I guess, how I identified. And then in 2002, I was involved in a automobile accident that left me paralyzed. So I do use a wheelchair for my mobility. And after my accident, I still continue to find ways to enjoy the outdoors. And, you know, some of those opportunities that came about in 2018 was working with Five Valleys Land Trust on a project out at Rock Creek, which was originally going to be developed by developers for like 30 houses. And fortunately enough, Five Valleys was able to purchase that property, and they had this idea of improving the access to it and in making it more inclusive, and with the universal design in mind. And that has kind of led into some of the other projects, specifically working with Sealy Lake Rocks up in Sealy Lake, and FWP and the Nature Conservancy up around Placid Lake to construct another universal trail. And not to mention, then that has led into working with Missoula County Parks, Trails, and Open Space on some of their projects too. And then again, now here fortunate enough to work with Kaniksu. So um, I I think that there has been um, a a bigger push to see um, places and spaces designed for inclusion and not with just people with disabilities in mind, but I use the term universal access, which is kind of all encompassing. Everybody at some point might need that access. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Brenden. Um, and so this project in particular, through this grant, what we're accomplishing are these listening sessions with community members with disabilities. We want to hear right from the people that live in our area and use our trails or parks or other features. And we're gonna take that information and along with other learning to build an accessibility and inclusion policy for Kaniksu Land Trust. And, Brenden and other staff at Summit Independent Living and the Rural Institute are super helpful in helping us to craft this policy and to do some assessments as well. So we had Brenden out at our property in Sandpoint, Sandpoint, Idaho. The land trust own started as a 180-acre community forest, and we built trails in there. We've just added on the community sled hill property, which connects to it, which I can't remember off the top of my head how many acres that is, but it kind of adds to the whole complex. And so it was really important to the organization when building these trails is that it was a place for everyone to come and be outdoors. It's a lot closer to the city center of Sandpoint than a lot of the other trails. We have public lands all over the place in Montana and Idaho, and sometimes those lands aren't easy to access. You got to take a long drive up a dirt road into the mountains in order to get onto a trailhead. And even then, with our topography, we have a lot of steeper trails and things. So this community forest, we wanted these trails to be something that's a lot more accessible for everyone, whether you don't have your own transportation, whether you have a disability, or maybe you don't read or speak English. And so we've worked with, our signs have pictures. Our trails are all, butterfly trail and a picture of a butterfly and similar things, because we heard from our community, not everybody might be able to read English. And so we really work to make that as accessible as possible. And in this picture is my executive director, Brenden, and Meg from the Rural Institute, where we were assessing our most accessible trail there, and kind of other aspects of accessibility, the restroom. We have an outdoor rec building that you can go indoors for classes or in the winter to get cross-country skis or warm up. So Brenden, I don't know if you have anything you want to mention from that quick assessment that we did.
Yeah, going to that site visit was interesting for me because the projects that I've been a part of and partnered up with other organizations didn't really have kind of the infrastructure that is up there at Pine Street Woods that you guys have. So the building, like you mentioned, and within that assessment, kind of pointed out some areas that could be improved as far as access to the building. So really, I think every site is unique in that regard that, um, you know, you might not only need to make improvements to a trail or something like that, but if you do have, um, facilities on the property, those might need to be assessed as well. So, and, Kaniksu is been really receptive to the feedback from myself and from Meg at the Rural Institute. So yeah, it, it was it was great to get up there and actually see what you guys have going on.
Yeah, and we're taking that information too, along with what we're gathering from community members to kind of list out like next steps and goals on things that we can improve. So aside from the policy, we have other things that we'll be working on. Also, looking at my notes, I forgot to mention some of our other partners. In Sandpoint, we have UCAN, which is a fitness facility designed for people with disabilities, and they do a lot of programs as well. They've been really helpful. Panhandle Special Needs is another disability organization over here in Idaho. And the Lake Pend Oreille School District here in Sandpoint. Sorry, I'm in Sandpoint today. Usually I'm in Montana, but today I'm in Sandpoint. But yeah, the school district has been really helpful as well. They do great programs and stuff for their students with disabilities. So we've brought them in as well. Okay, we can move on to the next slide and talk about our challenges that we've had during this project. Go ahead to the next one. So yeah, our main challenge we've come up against during this project is focus groups. We wanted to have focus groups comprised of local people in our Montana area and our Idaho area to talk with people with disabilities to get their direct feedback. So what I did is I set up a series of meetings both in Montana and in Idaho. I offered these meetings through Zoom as well if people weren't able to make them, and plan to have 2 in each location to kind of build on feedback received from the first meeting, build on that. And the challenge came from this information getting posted publicly. You know, I made my best effort to get all the information outlined on one flyer that we could send out to community members through our disability partner organizations. I didn't intend for it to be publicly posted, but it did end up going out. And what became the problem was the influx of people that we were not trying to bring into these focus groups. So we have some individuals that are pretty wary of our conservation work and are kind of always watching projects that we're involved in, and they'd kind of latched onto this and wanting to kind of expose our possible ulterior motives of helping people with disabilities outdoors. We also had a large surge of online people wanting to join. And we felt that the huge number of online participants were solely after the gift card. We have gift cards to offer community members with disabilities to compensate for the time they're taking out of their day to come and meet with us. That's provided through the grant we have through the Land Trust Alliance. But it kind of seemed to have drawn the wrong crowd when this information went out. I think we can go to the next slide. And it shows some more. Yeah. So what we did to come up with these challenges of, we saw that we wanted the focus group to be a safe space where people with disabilities felt comfortable sharing their life experiences, talking about challenges they've had in the outdoors and what we might be able to do better. And we felt with this influx, both locally and online, it wasn't feeling like it was going to be that safe space. So we took a step back, we postponed those in-person meetings, and sent everyone to a single Zoom meeting. And to help try to make that meeting more secure, we required a registration form. We asked people their location because we're trying to focus on our own service area, and their connection to the disability community. You know, we're really hoping to hear from people with disabilities themselves or their caregivers, their parents, the people that have these direct experiences that we could talk about. So we were able to do that. We held the Zoom meeting about a month ago in the middle of February. And this really enabled us to make this a safe space. You know, through these virtual meetings, you can control who's allowed in, you can control the mute and things like that. So we felt more comfortable with this being a safe place. And we ended up having about 45 participants, and only about 5 of those were people that we could verify we knew were in our area. You can see on like the photo here we included is from our the breakout room that Brenden and I ran. Since we had so many participants, we had to break them into separate rooms to hear from everyone. And the 2 people with smiley faces are members of the Sandpoint community, and the rest we're unsure of. They didn't, you know, turn the cameras on or unmute, and afterwards, in order to receive their gift cards, none provided their mailing addresses. So we ended up with only about 5 people giving us legitimate feedback from within our service area. But we're not just going to stop there. We're going to continue these conversations. I think you can go ahead to the next one where we talk about momentum. Yeah. And then next. So all of this so far is about the relationship building. It's about learning. And so we're just going to continue that. We're not going to go out and be making changes in the community based off of just a couple people's opinions. We're going to continue building these relationships with the disability service organizations and with disabled people in our communities, and continue to gather information, keep the conversation going. And these conversations, along with the work we've already done, like I said, are going to go into a list of next steps that we can actually implement on KLT-owned facilities. So here at our main office in Sandpoint, we know our entrance door, the threshold, has kind of a little lip. We need to kind of fix that a little bit to be better accessible. And we've talked about our trail signs and our website and our maps and how all of those could be better accessible, and provide better information as well. Brenden, is there anything you want to add at this point from our focus groups and moving forward?
Yeah, I guess maybe just to back up a little bit, you don't have to move the slides back or anything, but I just wanted to touch on, the challenges that you've experienced in and around Sandpoint and Thompson Falls, whereas my experience has been completely the opposite. There really hasn't been any pushback around universal trail design in and around the Missoula area or Placid. It's been really receptive. So I do find that interesting, the 2 different experiences that both you and I have experienced. And some of the challenges, I guess, within those projects that I have faced was mainly regarding funding for those projects. So at first, for example, Five Valleys Land Trust in 2018, when I started working with them, really didn't have a whole lot of funding. So they brought on the Montana Conservation Corps group of folks for 2 weeks throughout that summer. And boy, those kids worked hard in the hot summer sun with, manual tools. And fortunately, the this the problem or the issue was solved by applying for other grants in Montana, specifically the Trail Stewardship Project and the Recreation Trails Program grants that are offered through Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And so that has allowed not only the project at Five Valleys, but the project up at Placid to bring in actual heavy equipment that can make better use of the time and actually construct a better trail in the long run. So yeah, just kind of wanted to mention that.
Yeah, those are good points. Especially the funding. That can be a holdup for people, or organizations to move forward on accessibility projects. They might know, we have these projects we want to do, there's these tasks that need to be completed, but how do I find the funding to do that? And I think a key piece of the project that we've done so far is that a lot of this can be done without funding. Just getting those conversations going. If your organization doesn't have a plan for how to improve accessibility, all you got to do is reach out and talk to people in your community, from disability organizations, people living with different disabilities, and just get those conversations started. I think we can move ahead to the next slide. So the lessons we learned and our advice. The main thing from this project so far is not allowing focus group information to get posted publicly. As a nonprofit organization, we have different rules regarding meetings than, say, a government organization that has to have more public notice and things of that nature. But for these focus groups, things would have gone a lot smoother without the information getting posted publicly. Or if I had constructed the flyer and left off that we were offering gift cards and left off the location information and required people to contact me in order to participate in these groups, it would have made a world of difference with the challenges that we came up with against. But it's been a huge learning opportunity, and definitely learned how I'll do things differently in the future. Gave us good information organization-wide of how we might do things differently. And then, the other kind of lesson learned and my advice to other people is, relationship building is hugely important. And it is slow. I've heard that from other people saying, relationship building is slow, take it slow, all that advice. But this was a really good opportunity to really hone that advice in, where, other projects, I might have just pushed forward with those in-person meetings and been like, well, I have to do it, so I'm just going to keep going forward. But my opinion is we made the right move to take a step back, take things a little slower, reschedule, refigure out what we need to do in order to do it properly. And then even, after that meeting and only hearing from a few people, continuing this slow relationship building by going out and meeting in person with the organizations or with people in the community. That's why I'm here in Sandpoint today. I'm meeting with the Panhandle Special Needs I forget, I is at the end of their name and I forget, Inc. maybe. But I'm meeting with a group of their clients that have disabilities today, and just continuing to make those connections and keep the conversation going. I think, the other piece too to add in here, why this is so important, there's a big saying in the disability world of nothing about us without us. And so that means including people with disabilities in projects that involve people with disabilities. They're the true experts on their own experiences, and the absolute best practice is to include those people from the very beginning. Anything you want to add, Brenden?
I think you said it great. Just like to reiterate, yeah, involving not only other partners or establishing relationships with other organizations, like you said, Kayla, bringing people in the community that have that lived experience is really vital. For example, one of the projects I was working on, we were going to put in Braille for blind, low vision folks, and along the trail at interpretive signage, and thinking that that would accommodate that group of folks. Turns out after we spoke with folks from the blind, low vision community, not a whole lot of folks read Braille anymore. So to solve that issue, we decided to go with audio descriptive posts, and that again kind of goes back to what you guys were doing up at the up there in Sandpoint with your depictions of images instead of just words. So again, involve as many people as you can, and the project will go a long ways.
Great. Well, that is some food for thought. My wheels are spinning, and if no one else steps up, I may have some questions. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat. It's on mine, it's in the top bar. It's a little bubble. I know that if we get out of here a little early, no one's going to complain, but I do have a couple questions for you guys, if you don't mind. When you talk about that site assessment that you did in that site visit, can you talk a little bit about that? What it included, and Brenden, also your experience.
Yeah. So the basic, what we did was just brought Brenden and Meg from the Rural Institute, just brought them to our office in Sandpoint, and basically just showed them around. We also sat down and had a big conversation about all kinds of things. But just looking at those things, how is our bathroom set up properly? I mentioned the step coming into the door. Realize that it's taller than it should be, and how I remember looking outside at kind of our approach into the entrance, and then we went up to Pine Street Woods and kind of did a similar thing. Showed them the restroom that's there, showed them the building, showed them the trail and the maps, and yeah, I mean, anything you want to add, Brenden?
Yeah, I think prior to doing that initial site visit, we were going to try and do a virtual tour, which would have been great for the first initial, hey, here's what this looks like this is what we're intending to do, but actually being there really helped out envision what you guys are after. And um, I think realistically, a lot of these projects start at the entrance, whether that's a long road, what kind of barriers might be there for somebody, whether it's transportation or whatever, and then that just goes into um, the parking lot and then the facilities, the trail, all those things. So it was nice to actually be there on the ground.
Yeah, and it was more of an informal assessment. Meg brought out her fancy measuring tool, but we didn't actually take it out. We could look at the ramp into the building and be like, that is not even to ADA. We looked at the outhouse, and it's kind of on a dirt parking lot, and a lot of the dirt either washed away or an animal dug it, and there's now like a lip that's difficult to get into. And so there are ways to do, formal assessments of literally measuring everything and going back to, the ADA or the ABA, the Architectural Barriers Act, or yeah, is that the B?
Yep. Yep.
And where they have, really specific numbers on the trail should be this wide, it should have this slope, a ramp should have this slope, the entrance should be this. So those are all things that are, definitely things you could directly measure, and we just kind of did more of an informal with Brenden and Meg, who are both very experienced. So
Great. Well, we have a few questions in the chat, and I'll also remind people that if there are, and you, Brenden, Kayla, anyone in the audience, if there are resources that you think are relevant and want to share with other people, just send them to us and we can share them with when we send out the email. So we have a question from Lilia about accessible, she's been working on accessible kayak and canoe launches in more remote area in places where big, highly engineered docks don't fit. Do you have examples of those, either of you?
Brenden, do you have any?
Yeah, so I believe maybe it's been about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks put in a kayak boat launch or dock out at Frenchtown State Park. And I think there is another one maybe around Helena. I can't.
It's Spring Prairie. I see Dave Landstrom on here. Dave, if you know, will you put it in the chat? I think I put Dave on the spot. Yes, Montana State Parks Foundation actually worked with the state parks to put those in. They're not particularly remote.
Right.
They're fairly front country, both of those. But the other place that, if I may add, is
Please.
Camp Bullwheel, right? They're in Dillon, and they have, I don't
Tennis.
know if they're remote, but because they probably are accessing.
Yeah,
All right,
Camp
thank you,
Bullwheel is
Dave.
in-
So Dave says that they're installing one in Flathead Lake this summer. So let's just, keep in touch about some of these improvements. A question from Emily: if either of you have worked with outside firms for accessibility assessments, and Brenden, is this something that you and Summit do?
Yeah, it's definitely something that Summit and myself do. So currently I'm contracted with Five Alleys and Kaniksu to provide, feedback and insight into their projects. So um, yeah, it's definitely in Summit's mission as far as advancing independence for people with disabilities goes. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And Emily, I've heard of another firm as well, that I can't put my name on at the top of my head, but I can be in touch with you. I'm sorry, did you have something, Kayla?
I did and just lost my train. Oh, like Summit and other organizations also have ADA coordinators. Sometimes they're through the county or through a city. They're also ones that could do those more in-depth assessments.
Great. Again, if folks have resources and want to share them, we can share those broadly as well. And your information, Brenden, will be shared as we proceed. With that, let's move forward. Melissa?
Thank you everyone for joining us today. As Diane mentioned in the beginning, this continuing the conversation throughout this year with these different webinars was a way for us to kind of build that momentum from the Outdoor Rec Summit in person in Butte 2 years ago. And we're excited to announce we will be in Billings this October. And so you can reach out to Diane or me if you want to give us money for sponsorship, or you want to have an exhibitor booth. Diane's good at the money. And we'll be building panelists. So go visit our website, and I would put that in here, but I don't want to ruin the chat. So Diane, if you have
I'll
that.
find it. I'll find it. Yes.
I don't want to touch the wrong button, y'all. So yeah, we are super excited about this. Put that on your calendar, and join us for these conversations. And as always, I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank Diane for leading these webinar series. Kayla and Brenden for joining us as guests and sharing their stories. And behind the scenes, Rachel and Glenna make these things happen at ITRR. So appreciate everyone. Diane, do you have some final thoughts?
Oh, I'm trying to multitask and put my finger on the Outdoor Recreation Summit webpage. I do have one follow-up. As many of you know, the legislature is in session right now, and on the table are some of those funds that we all rely on, that were mentioned by Brenden and Kayla. One of those funds is RTP, which is a federal program that is being considered right now in Washington, D.C. And the best source of information that I have is American Trails Coalition. They have information about to learn more about what's happening with that. I think there's an action alert right now. And the other is at the state level, there's a bill that is called Senate Bill 307, and it would cut in half the funds that are available for these types of projects. So the funds that Brenden has relied on at Five Valleys, the funds that Thompson Falls would probably rely on to make improvements locally in Montana, that is on the chopping block. So I'm putting in the chat a link to the Montana Trails Coalition. They have Bob Walker sends out a weekly update on bills affecting parks, trails, and recreation. And they also have an every other week webinar that you can contact them directly to track that. But you know, we are in a time of change and disruption of some of those traditional funding sources that we have looked to and relied on at the federal level and the state level. So it's just something to keep your eye on if you want to have funds, limited funds, but funds available to do these types of improvements. So with that, I can't find the link. We'll send it out with the email. If Rachel was here, Rachel would do it. So thank you so much. Any wrap up, Kayla, Brenden?
I would just mention, talking about legislative updates. A related one to this project is that Montana, our Attorney General, signed on to a lawsuit trying to appeal Section 504 of the Rehab Act, which secures civil rights for people with disabilities. And our Attorney General in Montana is trying to eliminate that. So that's another thing to reach out about and be aware of, because it's not right.
All right,
Yeah.
hold on, because I found the, no, I don't have it. Okay. All right, well, thanks, everyone. We'll send that link out when you hear from us. So good afternoon. It's now afternoon, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.